Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you yet another Unlocking Age of Sigmar. Today I have with me Kieran Dunleavy. Kieran, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm
S-
happy to be back talking all things elfy for a second time.
Thanks for joining. I'm really interested in this one. We're doing Wood Elves tonight. We're going to do both the regular Wood Elf army as well as the Sylvaneth, the Treemen focused army. They do work together, but they do have their own synergies. And we're gonna dive in and see if the Wood Elves have gained or lost anything, if they've retained some of the flavor that people who enjoyed them and hated to be across from the table from them from 8th edition and previous editions. So we will dive right in. But before we go ahead and do that, anything you want to just open up with before we in terms of ideas or surprises when you were overlooking these scrolls, Kieran?
Well, something I wanted to say out of the gates here is just to sort of lay some background about your experience and my experience with this army. I first played Wood Elves in the Warhammer incarnation in about 1997, 98.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had those for a long time, and I've had a collection that's built up through all those different aesthetic changes that they've gone through. Um, but I admittedly have not played them a whole lot since that new army book came along 2 years ago. Is it 2 years ago now, or
Yeah,
close to it?
I think maybe about a year and a half at most. I mean, they're one of the more recent books.
Yeah. But I understand that your angle on this is that you want to embark upon the road of the Sylvan Woods,
Yeah,
right?
well, my first experience with Wood Elves goes back to probably 5th edition or something like that. It was prior to me giving up the game and taking a long hiatus. And uh, I had a dark elf army. I had converted my own, chariot with Malekith. I had what I thought was just a brutal army, and I got schooled by a buddy of mine. He may be watching. He gave up on Warhammer a long time ago. He's into historical now. George Rizzo, and he played the avoidance game. I had not experienced an army that did that, and it was humbling. It was really humbling. He just shot the shit out of these dark elves, and I didn't know what I was walking into. And my more recent experience has been people who've played the avoidance game. I played it at a couple of tournaments. I haven't played any casual games with them. And I was one of those people that was just like, look, I'll play it. If that's your army, I will play it. I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it. But I'm never the kind of person that would say no, because I think every army has its place. But when I got into Age of Sigmar, my son at the same time is seeing the ogres and saying, Mastodon, I want that. Giant, I want that. He also saw the Treemen, and the first thing he thought was Treebeard, because he saw Lord of the Rings.
You
So of
betcha.
course, that's how I was like, all right, you know what? I have this interest in getting not a wood elf army necessarily or a focused army like that, but I like the idea
Mm-hmm.
of the core of the Sylvaneth. So I'm going to look to incorporate that. I've got the war host. I have an extra branch wraith, so I have two of those because one of them comes in the war host, and I have a set of treemen. I'm looking to get another treeman so I can make Durthu and then some extra dryads for summoning, and then we'll see. Maybe there's one or two things in the wood elves that I will add to that. But that's where I'm going at this point. That's what got me into it. My son asked,
Good.
and I said, you know what? I think I'm interested in that too. Let's do that. He doesn't. He's seen the box. He hasn't seen it opened up yet. He keeps asking me, when are you going to start building that, Dad? And I said, you know what? I think I got to paint some of this stuff I've got built already first.
Yeah, got to show some discipline.
I'm getting called out by some of my viewers, so and they're right. They're right.
Good.
I don't like seeing gray plastic or even prime black. So I don't blame them. I agree.
Well, maybe we'll reveal some things along the way here that are some gems that you just can't resist having with the Sylvaneth.
We'll see. I'm looking forward to learning as well as spreading the knowledge. So for our viewers, anybody who's new to the channel or new to these unlockings, we're going to go over each of the war scrolls. We're going to start off with the generic characters. We'll probably do another episode. If we have time, if we blast through these, maybe we'll go look back. But the idea is to look at just the mainstay of the army, and any special characters or named characters we'll save for another episode and specifically deal with those. I think I'm looking to maybe do, just because there's so many less of the special characters, maybe we'll do one episode with all of the elf special characters, combine all the armies together and do it that way. But today we're just going to stick with the generics. Maybe we'll include Durthu because there's so few things in the Sylvaneth army, and just it's the only special character for that one. But for the rest of the Wood Elves, I think we might leave. But let's see how much time it is. Hopefully this won't be another 2-hour and 40-minute show, because that's what we've had before. Apologies to my viewers. Those people who want paint-episodes that just have stuff in the background and listen to, this is probably really good for you. But people who really want to just want something a little more brief, I think it's the wrong show. We'll see.
Well, let's go down that road then.
All right, let's do it. I'm going to go ahead and share, and we'll get to it.
I think we'll talk about it at some point along the way, but of course there's some thematic things that go along with the Wood Elves that you would expect them to have when carrying over from their stylistic of play from the 8th edition. But there was a few things in here that surprised me a little bit. So I'll talk about those when they come up in the relevant war scroll.
Sure.
So not exactly as I would have expected it to carry over from the change.
Yeah, there are definitely some surprises. I was definitely surprised, as I have been in just about every one of these unlockings. I'm going to also say to anybody who's tuned in, if you hear what sounds like over exuberance, it is not because I'm an employee of GW. It's because I'm amazed sometimes at how absolutely devastatingly killy just about every unit can be. The potential for everything to kill everything else, which is a big departure from Warhammer historically, in my opinion. I mean, there may have been previous editions where this was more common, but you can have the most garbage units or chaff units that were almost throwaway units to just redirect people, who can do damage to even the toughest things. And that's, sometimes I'm just surprised when I read it, and I'm just like, wow, that really is, I've had a couple people make comments about how I think everything is great. You know what? I do think almost everything is great, but we'll see.
I don't think you need to apologize for your exuberance. That's part of your charm.
Is it? Oh, I've never been called charming before, but okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. Thank you. All right, so why don't we start off? You can take the Glade. We're gonna skip over Araloth again. Is that how you pronounce his name? Araloth. Yeah. Maybe we'll come back to it if we have time. But let's start with the Glade Captain Battle Standard Bearer.
Okay. All right. So this is the Standard Bearer Captain. Well, I think we find first off that elves move fast. So at a 6-inch move, that's what we're going to see for most of the standard 2-legged elves as they come through here. You're also going to find that they're not terribly well armored. Like, this is a hero guy, and most other heroes that we encounter in the past probably have a 4+ save, whereas unsurprisingly, you're going to see lighter armored elf heroes, so a 5+ save. The other couple things are pretty standard. The bravery is good. Wounds 5 is pretty standard for a character all across the board, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the mainstay for any hero. It's a rare thing that you see a 6 or a 7. Sometimes even when you get like a mount or a chariot, it's still 5, which I find kind of interesting. But it works.
Okay, so this guy, the good thing about them is that the elves are better at hitting than most. So you're going to find that they're going to hit on 3s. This guy happens to wound on 3s as well. So he is, again, average combat prowess comparatively. He has one cool thing, though. One of his abilities is, and this is a bit of a surprise that he has it, called To Their Dying Breath. So that means that if you kill this guy, then he takes a final whack at you, like he's imagining he's some sort of dwarf slayer, I think.
Yeah.
In the same vein as that. So he gets this full complement of attacks at you after you kill him, just as one little parting shot to let you know that he was there.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I see the mechanic with the new corn models too. The I forget what they're called from the starter set, which makes them extremely butch, even though you take them out.
But I want to say it now, but this is the only model in this whole list of war scrolls that has that.
Oh, really?
So it's not a thematic thing. It's just a one-off.
That's kind of unusual. That's interesting. It's not what I
Yeah.
would have expected for a special ability from the Wood Elves.
Anyway, so his other ability, of course, is to be the banner bearer. So he carries the banner of Athaloran. The way that this thing works is effectively, it's very powerful. And here's why you'd want this. Because standard stock, he casts an 8-inch aura of giving you a 4+ roll to discount a wound and a mortal wound. So this is, you know, for guys carrying over from Warhammer, this is effectively a ward save of 4+.
Yeah.
In an 8-inch radius from this guy.
That's huge, but it's keyword driven.
True, it's got to be a wanderer. Yeah, you're right. It's got to be a wanderer, which translation means wood elf.
Yeah.
So anything you thought of as a wood elf before.
Yeah, we're looking at two themes in this army, which I probably should have mentioned already. That there are the wanderers, which are what the conventional wood elves that we know, and then there's the Sylvaneth, which are the treeman themed ones. So this is going to work with a wanderer themed army, which still, that's what most people, I guess, know of wood elves. But that's a great ability. You just do not find the equivalent of ward saves very prevalent in it's usually a rare thing. This is the ability to make it far more common for your army to cover a whole bunch. It's just a blanket 8-inch, right?
That's right. Wow. But he can step it up. He can plant that standard and not move during his hero phase. He can plant it, and then he extends that to an 18-inch radius.
Yeah, that's crazy. I gotta say this. The battle standard bearers have been varying degrees of power and weakness in terms of whether I think I would field them or not. I cannot see not putting this one up there. You could really advance your army within that 18-inch. Just plant that guy back in the backfield and cover most of your army as it advances. And then if you want to, run this guy up. Absolutely.
Here's one quick point before we leave him that I want to ask about that. In your experience with other battle standard bearers that have this plant the standard ability, isn't it usually once per game that they can do that?
I'm not really sure. That's a good question. I think we
probably this one doesn't have that distinction. He could potentially just park himself for the whole game and say, planting my standard turn 1, planting my standard turn 2, planting my standard turn 3, etc.
Or maybe run up, not have it, and then plant it again, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'll have to look at that. I think you're right. This is one of those few times where there's a departure. You'll find that with a lot of abilities in different army lists, they have themes that they're consistent, and then sometimes they just break away from the mold. This is one of them. I wouldn't even have noticed that. It's one of those things where you really got to read it appropriately. You got to really read it. You can't just gloss over it. But this is a powerful ability for the Wanderer list.
I think that's a really notable thing. If that's the case, and while you're talking about the next one, I'm going to go and look at a different battle standard bearer and see if it does work that way.
You got it. All right, I'm going to move on to the Glade Lord. Okay, so the Glade Lord. Now, the Glade Lord is, he's got a little bit of a better bravery. He's got and I'm going to read this because I don't remember whether he has to choose, and sometimes this is the case where you have to choose. Okay, some Glade Lords go to war with a magical bow of Lauren and a double-handed starlight great blade that can bisect the warrior with a single swing, while others whirl through their foes with a kindred blade in one hand and a starlight spear in the other. Okay, so it looks like you have to make the choice. All right, so and that, which is fine. You've got the you have to make a choice of which missile weapon and which melee weapon you're going to use. And he has a very nice Hail of Doom arrow ability. So let's actually take a look. The Hunting Falcon's beak, I think, is very cool. It's a little bit shorter range. I think that the Bow of Lauren is probably what I would use. 3 attacks, 20-inch range, a little bit better of the hit, and of course you got a rend. I've been noticing that there's the rends are not as common in this. You need some synergies to get rends with some of the rank and file, at least from my read through. I found that as well. Any rends are good for this army, but I think you're going to be dishing a lot of shots out. So even without the rends, if you're throwing enough arrows in the air, there's going to be a lot of saves that are going to be made, and people are going to fail them unless they're at 1-ups, which can happen. That definitely can happen. If you're at a 3-up, which is not common, but it can happen. A Mystic Shield in terrain, and you're good. So he's got 3 attacks with any of these weapons that he chooses, and most of them are 3 up to hit. Like you said, they're much more precision based. But this Hail of Doom arrow, once per game, he can use this in his shooting phase, and he gets 3d6 attacks with his Bow of Valoran instead of just the 3. That's crazy. That's great when you consider that that's 20 inches. And you can get. I mean, look, you might not roll very well, but on average, you're going to get about 9 attacks. And when you consider that's a -1 rend and a pretty good range, and he can move up 6 inches in order to do so. Most of the time, he can move up if he goes on his starting line. You'll be able to get the units that are on the closest vantage point in the game in your opponent's deployment zone. You should be able to get that. The Arrow of Kurnaus. After setup is complete, roll a dice if the enemy general is visible. Now, that's a key one. If he's visible, you never know. It could be a caster that's hiding. But this is very similar to the previous edition, where before you started the game, he kind of got a shot off on your on a character of the choosing of the Wood Elf player's choosing. And this one it does have a little bit more of a caveat. It's visible to at least 1 Glade Lord from your army. So it doesn't have to be this guy. You have other Glade Lords, I guess you can get that, and that's nice. On a 5 or more, that general suffers a mortal wound. So look, it's only a 5 up, but you got to consider that there's a reasonably good chance that your general is going to be a wound down walking into the game because of this. It's just one of those, like, FU type abilities where the Glade Lord just sails. I like that from the previous edition. Just sails an arrow in the air just to open up the fight. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so he's a command ability. All right, until your next phase, you can re-roll all to hit rolls of 1 for wanderer units from your army that are within 8 inches. Now, when you consider, and we'll just consider this ability, it's only 8 inches, but that's 16 across. And as long as they're within that range, even just 1 guy in a line of archers, that's going to be huge when you consider that a lot of the to hit rolls in this army start at 3 up. Okay, and then you'll have rerolls. The chances of hitting are profoundly greater with this ability, and you're not. I don't think you have that much concern that you're going to get at least a good handful of your army within that 16-inch radius. So look, I like him. I think he's definitely has a place in the army. We'll have to take a look if these abilities are better or worse than the other hero characters. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think on that last command ability, it lends itself to be flexible enough for the one situation that you described, where you're holding the line and you're using it on your archer units for range. But it can also be a real big player when you throw in your Wild Riders and charge them into combat, along with maybe your Wildwood Rangers as well. And you have those guys that naturally would hit on a 3 now getting rerolls as well.
You better move this guy up pretty quickly, though, because those Cav type units are going to far outpace him with only his 6 move. But being that you have 8 inches range, there's a pretty good chance that if he just runs up, that he probably could stay close for at least the first couple of turns.
Yeah, admittedly, my situation is more of a late game sort of a player than early game, obviously.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
All right. Well, did you take a look at another war scroll? Did you find out whether it's
Actually, I looked around at a few different banner bearers from other units, and as it turns out, I'm wrong. There's only a couple of them that seem to be once per game sort of thing.
Cool. Well, that one is pretty powerful to be consistently used. So I'm suitably impressed.
Yeah, it doesn't diminish what we said about that one. It's a taker. It's a keeper for sure.
Okay, so Glade Lord on a Great Eagle. If you like the Glade Lord, you might like him on a Great Eagle even better.
Yeah, so of course being on an Eagle gives you a little bit of a combat partner. The thing that it offers is 4 extra attacks. There's nothing special about those attacks, but it is 4 extras. But it's 6 of them when you charge.
Uh-huh.
And obviously when you're flying and moving 16, that's a very great possibility that you're going to be charging.
Yeah.
Now his command ability that he adds that makes a subtle difference is that you can add 2 to the charging rolls of a Wanderer unit in their next charge phase. But specifically, if you're pairing that and targeting Warhawk Riders, then they will add 4 to their charge roll, which guarantees it, right? In all those cases. Because remember, you can move as close as 3 inches to an enemy, and no closer than that. So there's always a chance that you could fail your charge. If you're a normal unit out there in Age of Sigmar world, there's that slim chance you could just blow it. But this makes sure that you could never blow it. You're always going to connect on your charge.
I'm just amazed that at the movement of, say, a 14 or a 16, that you can basically add 4 after making a regular move, and add 4 to that 2d6 that you're going to roll. You know, there's just such. We did with Vince Ventrolo and I did the Slaanesh demons last night in addition to Khorne, and the Slaanesh are just so quick, and I imagine that the Wood Elves have got to be near rivals, if not, you know, superseding some of the speed. Maybe not for, you know, the one fastest unit they have, but I'm just thinking if this is the trend for the Warhawk Riders or for some of the other units, that's just incredible distance. And we're talking about, you know, 2 for just any Wanderers within 16 inches, 4 for Warhawk Riders. Now, we'll get to Warhawk Riders and see if they're worth taking. But the ability to pick and choose when you want to charge, to stand off from such a distance outside maybe your opponent's range, maybe even outside their shooting range, and be able to get in on them when you want to, is really what the Wood Elves, I think, are all about.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be a surprise. This is an army that was about mobility always, and it still is. For the most part, we're going to bump into some units that don't necessarily rely on that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, expect them to move fast and be where they need to be, and they can feint in one position of the field and relocate to another one a whole lot easier than most other armies can.
Yeah, and I like the idea that you can play against that mold with some of these units, but we'll see if they make sense or if they work. Okay, Glade Lord on a Great Stag. Now, I had heard that this was supposed to be a vast improvement over the previous edition, which was apparently a big disappointment. I forget who mentioned it. They said that if you bought your Great Lord on a Great Stag, if you got that model, you should be happy. You know, you're going to be happy with this. So let's take a little look at it. First of all, we got a bump up in wounds. The movement is not quite as to be expected. Is not quite as fast, but 10 inches is nothing to laugh at. A lot of cav type units in the game cap out at 8, so this is a little bit faster. You know, respectable 4+, which obviously you can improve upon. But the 7 wounds is nice. You know, again, the Bow of Lauren, I think we're going to see that with almost all the heroes. Kindred Blade, Starlight Spear, and of course the Great Stag's Mighty Antlers. 3 attacks, which, you know, all have rends, which is nice. So the Impaling Charge. The Great Stag's Mighty Antlers inflict double damage of this model charge this turn. You got to expect that it's in a Wood Elf army, they're probably going to be the ones that are going to get the charge in. But the idea that it can take, you know, double damage. So there's 3 attacks there, you know, 4 up, 3 up, -1 rend, and instead of 1 damage, it'll be 2. But I think the thing that really distinguishes this particular hero from the others is going to be the Lord of the Wild Hunt, which I just love in terms of the name of the ability, of course. If a Glade Lord on a Great Stag uses this ability, select a Wanderer unit within 16 inches, which is basically going to be, you know, nearly the whole board. You know, that's if you're centrally located, you're going to have a large area and probably get your entire army, except for maybe just a few units. You add 2 to your unit's charge roll, big surprise, until your next charge phase. If you picked a unit of Wild Riders, which in 8th edition were just brutal if they charged into you, brutal. You can add 4 to that unit's charge. So this guy is definitely going to be with the Wild Riders, and it invokes, you know, just just an army of stag and you know, reindeer riding Wood Elves, and obviously that 4 extra charge is going to be a big deal. We'll see how that matters for the Wild Riders later.
Yeah. So my comment on that is that's an exact mirror of the last ability we looked at for the Eagle Rider, but applies to a different unit that gives that extra bonus.
Yeah, so you might want to take like a Glade Rider, a Glade Lord of each, and pair them with each of those units, because they would really have some nice synergy.
Yep.
And I imagine that the one that's on foot, all of these different Glade Lords will give him that ability where he can, you know, shoot at, you know, the line of sight to the enemy general would apply to these guys, not just a Glade Lord on foot.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd point out here before we leave this guy behind is he is one of the few sources of rending that you're going to have in this army. So that's why I think the Great Stag is looked upon favorably, because he's a source of that. And when he charges, he doubles up his damage. So that's why he's favorable.
Well, apparently a big improvement over the last one. Okay, now I was told you get the Glade Lord on a Forest Dragon. I was told if I wanted to add one component into my Sylvaneth army, just to give it a little more dimension, a little more punch or whatever, that I should pick this. So let's take a look at the Glade Lord on a Forest Dragon and tell me why this is a must include.
Well, I can tell you why in pretty short order. One, because it's a dragon, dude.
Yeah.
We talked about dragons, and both got super excited when we were talking about the High Elf edition.
Yeah.
They're no different here. The dragons are still dragons. With one ability shift, the High Elf dragon breathed fire on things and caused mortal wounds through shooting. This guy has an ability that, although not quite immediately as devastating, I think in the game mechanic and the strategy of the game beats it out, and that's its soporific breath.
Yeah.
Okay. So here I'll read it out to those that don't want to squint at the screen. It says that enemy units within 3 inches of a Forest Dragon cannot be chosen to make attacks in the combat phase until all other units have made their attacks. Bam. So the way that this is really important for those of you that have played Age of Sigmar already, selecting which combats you deal with and activating the units to attack is a very, very important thing, in my opinion, in the Age of Sigmar game.
Mm-hmm.
That can make and break the conflict in a lot of cases. So having this in your back pocket as an automatic, no, you wait until I'm done. No shush, you wait. Right? And if you're going to be playful at the table, I think that you should do that. You should just go, no shush, you wait. You wait till I'm done.
You might not have another game with that opponent, but sure, you can do that.
Because that's how that goes. I think that's a gigantic deal. Mitch. What's your feelings about that?
I looked at that. After we had that conversation, it was at a hangout last week with a bunch of us, I think Friday night. And I looked at that ability when we were done, just before I crashed, because I took off because it was getting really late. And that's when I looked at that, I said, wow, that's amazing. And the first thing that came to mind is not that it was that just the ability in of itself, the fact that it was on a dragon, because the profile of a dragon is huge. And I've played it with and against dragons and dragon-like sized creatures already. Zombie dragon, Terrorgeist being my mainstay army, the vampire counts. But I put one of these guys down on the table, and the ability when you're measuring from the model. Some people are measuring from the base, and I can understand that for simplicity's sake. But I'm trying to be pure and trying to stick to as much of the rules as written as possible, whatever your interpretations on some of these rules are. So I'm trying to stick to and make sure that I work the game the way it's meant to be played as much as I can. And when you take that into consideration, there's a lot of ground you're covering with that 3 inches of enemy units that anybody nearby that dragon is, from the tail to the wing to the snout, is going to be affected. So you're going to get a lot of units that are going to basically be frozen until you've done all your combats. And I think that's incredible.
Yeah. So, well, we should cover a couple other quick things before we lose ourselves entirely in that soporific breath ability.
we could sit here and talk for half an hour on that.
We could. The thing that you do give up with a Glade Lord on here is any shooting ability. So this is the one Glade Lord that doesn't have the Bow of Lorraine, but I'm sure that you'll get over that. What he trades that in for is his Kindred Shields that allows him to re-roll any of his failed saves. Okay, so at a 4+ save and 12 wounds, that makes you pretty much 20 wounds worth in a lot of cases, unless you're encountering a lot of Ren stuff.
You got to assume there's going to be Rens, yeah, but still.
Yeah. So, you're going to save some. You're going to save some of those on rerolls.
Oh, yeah.
So let's be truthful. And then his command ability, and we saw this in the High Elf one as well, is he can select a Wanderer unit within 16, and apply the buff of having them reroll all of their ones when hitting and wounding, right through to the next hero phase. So I think there's a small note in there that's worth lingering on, and that is that it's until your next hero phase.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be the combat that you're currently doing on your turn. It can be the combat you're doing on your opponent's turn. And if he manages to double up on turns together, then you still got that buff holding strong.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it wasn't readily apparent when I was doing the Bretonian unlocking, that all those special abilities on a charge carry over not just your turn but your opponent's turn, because it's until your next your turn. These are really big distinctions. These types of abilities can last far longer than you expect, where in some cases it extends the power where it may not be intuitive for things like charges and stuff like that. The re-rolling of ones on wounds, especially with the great to hit and wound rolls this army already has, is a big deal. Yeah. I like them. I can't wait to convert them up because I've got a model for it. The only thing I need is the Glade Lord. I got to find a Glade Lord without having to. I can't. It's hard to find the bit, but I'll find it eventually.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. It's worth doing.
All right, a mounted Glade Lord. Okay, so this is just a Glade Lord. I like this model, by the way. This is probably my favorite of the models that I'm looking to choose to pick the Glade Lord that I want with my army, because he just looks like he would fit with a Sylvaneth army more than the other guys. He just looks like he's part of the woods. He's heavily armored, but he's got all this tree stuff all over him. And he's mounted on a steed, a Wood Elf steed. But look at that move for regular mounted. Not even like a flying. That's a crazy move for regular cav type unit. Hunting spear, mount stamping hooves, you get 6 attacks. So let's take a look. The Hunter's Strike. All right, so a Starlight Hunting Spear inflicts die 3 instead of 1 on the turn that it charged. Okay, reroll failed saves for which is awesome for the Kindred Shield. So you're gonna, like you said, like same thing with the dragon. You're gonna be able to save some of those wounds that got through, that normally we get through. Command ability, yep. Lord of the Hunt. So a wanderer unit within 16 inches can add 2 to the unit's charge roll, similar, but the bonus here is for Glade Riders now. So again, these are very themed. If you have an army that's themed for Wild Riders or Glade Riders or Warhawk Riders, that you have multiples of these, obviously you would take. But if you want to be able to pair this up with any of these units, there seems to be one version for each of these different types of units, and I like that ability.
Yeah. And I would say that on this guy, that's the lesser of the abilities, because let's think about who that applies to. That bonus charging applies to your Glade Riders, which are your super lightly armored, flitting around fast cavalry. Probably not too eager to get them into the charge.
Yeah, but you still get the 16-inch adding 2 to everybody else. But yes,
yes.
Those are not the ones. We'll talk about Glade Riders, but they're not your frontline troops.
So I'd say that's not a reason to not take this mounted Glade Lord. It's just that sort of extended ability is probably not going to serve you.
Maybe it'll be easier for me to find the bit for the rider for the actual mounted Glade Lord then, because maybe the lesser of interest for everybody else that's out there. Okay, we're going to skip over Orion and we're going to go to the Hunting Hounds. Okay. Yeah. So the Hunting Hounds, now you can have any number of models, which means there's no minimum. But why would you take this and just take 1? You're going to take 5. You're going to take 10. Okay. This unit, 2 wounds a pop. This used to be just one of those add-ons that you'd see with Orion. I don't know. Could you take a unit of Hunting Hounds in the previous edition as well?
Not without Orion, you couldn't. Wow. So that's the difference here.
Oh,
is that you have the freedom to take these without having Orion.
Okay, well that's
although they do get a bit of a buff for having Orion.
Yes, you do. They're pretty quick, 12 inches, not bad. 2 attacks, no Rens. And a 4-up was pretty average. They make 3 attacks instead of 2 if they're within 6 inches of Orion. So that's a pretty big deal. But they could still be viable taking them on their own. They got a pretty good move. And of course, any wizards that you have on the table are then going to be able to summon more Hunting Hounds if you've deployed a starter unit based on the interpretation I have of summoning.
Mm-hmm.
So look, is there a reason to take them without Orion? There could be. We'll have to see how they compare to the rest of the units as we go through them. I'm just going to say, with a weaker save. And just average attacks, even though they get 2 extra attacks apiece, I think that I still probably, I stick to pairing them with Orion, because then they get the boost. But you can't really laugh at the idea of a 5, the ability to summon these guys with a 5 casting cost.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. And there's something else in there too that I wanted to bring to the front, and that is that when you read how these are summoned, and I'll read it out loud here. So, summoning hounds are cast on a 5, blah, 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 successfully cast. You can set up a unit of exactly 5 hounds within 8 inches of the summoner. It's added to your army, but may not move in your next movement phase. Right. So what's curious to me about this is that it doesn't have a restriction on how close it can be to your enemy. Like other summoning units do. Did you notice that?
No, I did not. That's why we're doing this type of stuff.
Yeah. So you can put those guys right in the pants of an enemy. Well, I guess never within 3 inches in a move phase, but 3 inches away from an enemy instead of 9 inches away.
No, if it doesn't say with a minimum, you can plant them. It says they can't move within 3 inches, but a summoning doesn't have that minimum. Yeah, you could put them right up in the grill of your opponent.
And then charge right away.
Yeah, right there. That's amazing.
There you go, kids. That's why you take hunting hounds without Orion.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, because clearly I didn't read that well enough. Yeah. Okay. I think I know a use for some of the extra direwolves that I haven't been using.
There you go.
All right, Wild Riders.
They go Wild Riders. So these were the everybody's love child in the Warhammer game. Fast moving, hard hitting, etc., etc. Oddly enough, though, with these guys, they do what we expect out of Elves, and that's hitting very easily, wounding on a 4+, but they do have 2 attacks each. Also, their steeds are a little bit better than your average steed, because they wound on a 4, not a 5 like most steeds do.
Yeah.
I guess that's where the antlers come in. Obviously, move very fast, have a very respectable bravery, and furthermore, if you plant a standard in there, they can add 1 to their bravery. And here's one thing that I wanted to, let's talk about standard bearers and hornblowers right here, because it's the first time it's come up, but it is going to be universal throughout the rest of the standard bearers and hornblowers. And that is that they add a bravery for having a standard, but 2 to their bravery if they are in cover.
Nice.
So it encourages your bigger units to be in cover. Secondly, the hornblower allows you to re-roll the dice when determining its run distance. And you're going to be on the move a lot with these guys, so I think that's useful. As far as its abilities, it has a little bit of a nod to having Orion around, because they have that sort of kindred that they don't do battle shock tests if Orion is within 18. But their key ingredient and key ability is that they can run and charge in the same turn.
Yeah, I love that mechanic. Anywhere I see that.
So let's do the math on this. So you move 12, you run, and if you roll a crappy roll, then you can roll it again. So you're sort of guaranteed to get at least 4 inches out of that. And then you're going to charge, and let's assume that you're a smart guy and you got one of those Glade Lords earlier who is going to help you with 4 extra inches on your charge roll. Mm-hmm. So if you roll an average charge roll and add, say, like 10 inches there, so now you just crossed 26 inches to get into combat in 1 turn.
Ouch. Yeah, that could be. That's the whole separation between deployment zones easily.
Yeah, and then once you get into the charge, you add 1 to the wound rolls made by the hunting spears when you charge. So you're wounding on 3s now.
Yeah, I think that the standard bearer, which we're going to see in most of these units, speaks to having these guys be in cover as much as possible. And you get not only the added bravery, but you get the bonus of obviously cover, which adds +1 to your save. I do want to point something out. One thing I had learned going back maybe about 2 weeks, that I had been playing wrong, where I thought that with cover you had to be fully within, your entire unit had to be fully within the footprint of a piece of terrain. You don't. You just have to be. Everybody has to at least be touching it. So these Wild Riders in a unit of 5 just need to have a corner of their base, or around, excuse me, not their base, a corner of just a piece of their model, basically overlapping onto a woodland, any kind of hill, anything like that. They're going to get that bonus. So something that you probably want to do, and you probably want to skirt as they're moving until they get where they want to go, whatever terrain you have on the board, because that's a nice extra ability. Yeah, the synergy is tremendous, even if you don't have Orion there. I don't know if they're as devastating. What do you think? Do you think they're as devastating as they were in 8th edition in comparison to what they have now?
No, for the one reason that they don't have any armor pierce rending.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I think that they're missing to make them really sell to me.
Yeah. Well, what you get through, you're probably gonna make sure you wound because of all the bonuses. But yeah, I think we're gonna see that as a theme with these units, that you're gonna get a lot of shots on target, but some of them but more of them are gonna bounce off than normal. They need a mechanic to imbue rend, and they don't seem to have much of that.
Okay.
All right. The Sisters of Twilight on a Forest Dragon. A great looking model, by the way. Anytime you have a tandem riders on a gigantic, dragon, I think it's awesome. So, what's the difference between this one and the last one? Well, the first thing is it's got a few more attacks because it's got 2 riders. The second thing is, well, let's take a look first of all at the breath ability. It is the same ability as the other one. So if you're really interested in that breath ability that kind of neuters your opponent and makes them wait until you've completed all your attacks until you can, until you get your attacks, this is yet another choice. The Forest Dragon is the same kind of dragon. So let's see about these other abilities. Impetuous Beast. If this model is within 12 inches of an enemy, you must attempt to charge. So it's got that frenzy type ability. Talon of Dawn. You add 1 to your wound roll when you charge. If the opponent is a chaos, if the model is chaos, targets chaos. So there's a nice anti-chaos mechanic here. Talon of Dusk. You add 1 to, now do you have to choose these, or are these all just compounded?
No, you've got see, it represents as each of the sisters, right?
Okay,
so one of the sisters has the Talon of Dawn, and the other one shoots the Talon of Dusk. So you get both shooting attacks out of the same model.
Where the other one didn't have any shooting, you have plenty of shooting on this one. So the Talon of Dusk, you add 1 to the wound roll if it's a unit of order. So you have the options depending on what you're going up against. If you're going up against Empire or Bretonnians or dwarves, you have one of the sisters who's going to get a little bonus there. And then Conjoined Destiny. I found this one interesting when I read it. You go roll a dice in each of your hero phase. If the result is odd, nothing happens. But if it's even, then the model heals a number of wounds equal to the dice roll. So if you roll a 6, you're going to be a happy person.
I think that's a really crafty rule, actually. I very much like it. Whether it's effective or not effective, it doesn't matter. It's crafty the way it's written.
It could go against you, but it has a nice healing mechanic, and I don't think you can necessarily count on it, but it should hit you 50% of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is pretty. So, what do you think? This one or the other one?
Well, you know what? I almost like this one a little bit better.
Yeah.
So what you give up is you give up a minor little bit of attack power when you get into combat, but really actually not that much, because you still get 6 attacks out of the 2 girls with their Twilight Spears, right? In addition to whatever you get out of the dragon. But you do get a real big boon out of the shooting. And one of the few things that gives you a shooting multi-damage thing, that Talon of Dawn, that is a nasty piece of work. It hits on 3s, it wounds on 3s, it rends, and then it does die 6 worth of damage.
Yeah, I may have to look for a couple of female archer models instead of the Glade Lord model. That's pretty crazy.
So then, of course, the other thing that you give up is you give up your command ability, because these girls are not commanders.
Well, if you made it your general, you'd have the generic one. But yes, I see what you mean.
Well, I suppose you would, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you would have to give up that if you don't really care about the command ability. And if I'm adding this to my Sylvaneth army, I wouldn't. Then yeah, it's the trade-off.
Yeah. So I think I like this. I give a bit of a tip to the girlies here.
Yeah, well, as should
choose
be.
one dragon.
All right. I think that I may be redirecting my thoughts there. Okay, you get the Spell Weaver. Finally, we get some spell casting.
Yes. Well, so again, not somebody you're going to throw into combat if you can help it, because you got 0 save just about. You can move a little bit faster if you're willing to plop yourself on a steed. I shouldn't say a little bit faster, a lot faster. You go from 6 to 14 inches of mobility.
Not bad.
So you can be where you need to be pretty much whenever. Here is the first time I've seen this, and I think it's very cool, this Ancient Blessings. So once per game, this model can call upon the Ancient Blessings when attempting to unbind a spell. When you do so, that attempt is automatically successful. So this is, in short terms, the Dispel Scroll.
Yeah.
Right? It's the automatic Dispel Scroll.
That's nice.
Yeah. Otherwise, she's standard wizard. You have the Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield at your disposal, but you also have the Blessings of Life. And this is an easy cast of 5. You can target a Wanderer unit within 16 inches, and you can return D3 slain models to that unit.
That's awesome.
Slain models, not wounds. So, of course, this is a great multiplier when you're casting it upon cavalry, wild riders who are bound to be in combat. But my favorite target, which we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to in a bit, is casting this upon your oh geez, I just lost the name of them. The fly guys on eagles, Warhawk Riders.
Warhawk Riders, yeah.
There it is. Thank you.
It's
yeah, Warhawk Riders, because they're a 4-wound model.
Nice.
And when you can bring back multiples of those, huzzah, you have just won.
That's
small
a great
bazaar.
mechanic. That's phenomenal. Yeah, anytime you can do that, it's. I mean, look, even the undead, you know, they either have a mechanic where I'm not talking about summoning. I'm talking about they have standards that can restore wounds or they can restore models. The ones that usually have models that can be restored, there are some that are multi-wound like the Warhawk Riders, and that's where it really gets powerful. So yeah, I like that a lot. That's a sweet spell.
It's a big deal.
All right. The Shadow Dancer. Okay. The Shadow Dancer is the hero that would match to the with the War Dancers, right? All right. So this is, I found this to be confusing, but very interesting in previous editions. But, you know, they have a lot of situational stuff, but they never really seem to be effective. And we'll talk about the unit, I guess. But this is the hero that would go with them. So I imagine there's going to be some really good synergy with that. First of all, really little armor, but they'll make up for it. Good move, 8 inches for an infantry unit. Pretty good move. You don't see that often. Some good attacks. Say again?
I said, no kidding. 8 inches for a guy on 2 legs.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the best we've seen. It's got to be.
That's some serious dancing. So 4 total attacks with 3 ups, 4 ups. You get a rend with the war staff, and let's take a look at some of its abilities. So the tattoos. Now this is like the same thing we saw with orcs and goblins. With I think what was it with the forest goblins or something like that, where they had like a 6
would have been on the savage orcs probably.
Yeah, and this is okay. So this is a 6 up, kind of a 6 up ward. So if you take any wounds, you roll a die, and on a 6 you ignore it. It's not great. It really doesn't make up for the fact that you only have a 6 armor, which is going to go away with any rend. It's going to make it very hard. But then let's take a look at some of its dance abilities. So at the start of your phase, you've got to choose. And I think this is the same that you'll see when we go to War Dancers. You can't have the same one in each consecutive round. So you got to change them. So you really need to pick and use some thought and strategy on which one you want to use when, because you're gonna have to walk away from that the next time you pick a dance. You might want to use something in the follow-up turn. So you have the Whirling Death, which it wounds on a 3 instead of a 4. Their blades, and it has now a rend of -1 instead of no rend, which is good. That's really good. So easier to wound, and now you have a rend. Not a bad thing. Certainly when you get into an initial stage of combat, this might be the one that you might want to open up with, just to start dishing out, especially if you plan on activating early. Okay. So, and now, mind you, let's also consider the synergies between the Shadow Dancer when we get to the War Dancers too, because you may not want to use the same one in each one because you're not going to open up with both of them at the same time. You're not going to pick one that's going to open up first. So you might want to pick a defensive one. And then we'll get to that in just a second. But here's the Storm of Blades, which is the next one. So this model, instead of making its regular attacks, it can make 4 attacks with the Weaving Blade, which is basically double. Now, it's not going to have the bonuses to wound and not have the additional rend. So if you're dealing with a really poor armored unit, this is probably where you want to go. But then you have the idea that if you want to probably improve its save, if you know you're not going to go early in the combat, you might want to consider this one. And again, depending on who you're up against, you have that Shadow's Coil, which means that you improve your 6-up save to a 4-up save. And that's it's nice to have those situational keys. You can't have it all, I guess, but you can pick and choose one of these per turn. They're also a wizard, which is great because these guys are clearly going to be running up the board pretty fast, and they're going to have the ability to unbind. I almost said dispel, but to unbind, which you want to have opponents further into the battle to be able to get within range. And then they have this Bridge of Shadows ability. So this is you can pick, if you only a casting cost of 5, you can pick a Wanderer unit within 18 inches, and they can double the distance they can move and gain the ability to fly for the next movement phase. Now, that is monstrous. Let's just imagine a cav unit like what was the cav unit we were just talking about? The Wild Riders?
Yeah, that's where my thought was going to as well, was to the Wild Riders.
Okay. Now, they can double the move, and they can fly. So let's think about this, of course, offensively, but there's also a defensive aspect to it because of the use of the retreat ability. All right, this is going to happen prior to close combat. And if you have a unit that's getting pummeled, or if you have a unit that you want to then position on another side of the battlefield where you need them more, you can pretty much strand a unit that you've stuck into combat, bloodied a little bit, and now you can retreat these guys all the way to another part of the battlefield. If it's a unit that also has a shooting mechanic, you don't have to. You can still shoot with that unit. You just put them on the other side of the battlefield, basically. That's just incredible because with the fly ability, you just move over units and over terrain. That's a fantastic ability.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love this ability. It is exactly the kind of stick and move, feinting aspect that you would expect out of Wood Elves. To be dodgy in one area, make you think it's all going to happen over here on the left. You play the little jazz hands, and suddenly you're in a different place entirely.
Oh God! All right, let's take a look at the War Dancers, which I'm sure are going to be playing bodyguard to the Hero Dancer.
Yeah, so you may as well carry that through. It's a lot of the same things to say there.
Well, yeah. Tell us about it. We got. Go ahead. Take this one.
Okay. Well, what's a little bit odd about them is they have either staves or blades that they work with, but the blade singer, if you have a champion, gets to work with both.
Oh, okay.
So that's a little bit of an odd thing, right? So it's your blade singer. Only your champion gets to work with the stave. So therefore, their abilities when it comes to the shadow dances are all related to the blades,
right,
rather than the stave. If you're following me there,
yeah.
But they are in all respects the same. Now, what I was thinking about when you're reading about the shadow dancer is that if you have both of those units involved in the same combat, you could be doing different abilities that overlap. So you might be doing Whirling Death with the Shadow Dancer while you're doing Shadow's Coil and getting the bonus save with the War Dancers themselves. And that's where you got to think about how you're going to activate, back to that really key part of the combat phase. How are you going to activate these guys? What's key to go first, etc.
Right.
Okay. They do have the tattoos just like he does, so they shrug off wounds on the 6. And they don't have a banner, but they do have access to a drummer, which gives them their reroll on the run distances.
Now it looks like the tattoo. It says on a 6. This is a mortal wound. Yeah, it's the same type of talismanic tattoos. For a minute, I thought that maybe it was something different. Yeah, they're gonna be just like the Shadow Dancer, but with a unit that he could probably use that ability if he really wanted to. I would use that his ability on a Cav unit. I have to admit. But yeah, you don't want this guy going up by himself and running up into combat. So would you take a unit of War Dancers, or maybe would you take the Shadow Dancer solo though?
I'm totally attracted to the Shadow Dancer for that magic ability that he has. I think that's a bomb spell for tactics on the battlefield, especially in scenario-driven stuff where you got to be in a bunch of different places on the field. It can really almost mean you can be wherever you need to be if you get that spell off. So I think he is one of the hidden superstars here in this Wood Elf army.
Yeah, the War Dancers are very situational. I think that you got to be very mindful of the fact that these dances cannot be consecutive. That really is, if there's an Achilles heel to these guys, it's the fact that you can't continue to use something if you have a really good opportunity to exploit. You have to switch it up.
Yeah, it's not like a unit in the old where you could, if you had access to great weapons or a hand weapon and shield, you could choose for the combat which one you're going to operate with, and you stick with it through that combat. That's what makes this a little bit hard, is you have to change your mind in protracted combats.
Yeah. All right. Anything more about this guy, or we'll move on?
No, we move on.
Okay. Now the Waywatcher Lord. Okay, so this is obviously the hero character that's going to be married to the Waywatchers and have some synergy. What we're seeing with this is now an anti-monster or hero effect, and we'll get into that in just a second. First of all, 20-inch range, 3 attacks with the bow. You're going to see that a lot. With these heroes. Typically, when you see these shooting attacks, I think they're more 2. A little slower, 6 inches, but certainly they're elves. They're fast. Invisible Hunter. Your opponent subtracts 1 from any hit rolls that target a Waywatcher Lord in the shooting phase if the model is in cover. All right, so you get a little Nurgle effect. They're going to get the bonus of save because they're going to be in cover, so they're going to have a 4-up save, and he's going to have a 4-up save. And then, of course, it's going to be harder for you to shoot this particular hero as well. Hawk-eyed Archer. All right, he can choose to make either fast shots or precise shots. All right, so fast shots. He can make 1 extra attack with his bow, and in addition, each time you roll a 6 or more, when making a fast shot, you make an additional attack. So there's certainly going to be an opportunity for you to get 6s with 3 attacks. It may not happen every time, but when you do, you're going to be able to get some more shots, and that's always a good thing. Precise shot. All right, so you're firing, and it inflicts double damage. So you may not get more shots. You do have the mechanic here of if you roll a 6, instead of getting another additional shot, you get the rend ability of -2. Now, if I had to choose between these two, and certainly it depends on whether or not I'm dealing with a heavily armored unit or not, I'm going to pick the precise shot, because anytime you can pile a rend in there, it's going to be a big deal. All right, I would trade off the extra attacks to get that rend, because the rend is going to mean it's going to be less likely for your opponent to make those saves. Obviously, if you're dealing with somebody who's got like a 5-up or 6-up armors, you would probably go for the fast shots. The Solitary Marksman. This is where we start getting into some of the anti-hero or monster mechanics. And I like this because in a game like Age of Sigmar, I don't like the comp that I hear a lot of people trying to institute where, 0 to 2 monsters and stuff like that. I like, if you're going to institute comp, I like where you have X amount of choices and maybe you have to pick from one or the other, or it counts as multiples if they're monsters and heroes, stuff like that. I prefer obviously no comp because that's how the game is played. And I think there's mechanics that kind of counter, people who are overzealous. And this is one of those things that I don't think people see until they play the game. There are some armies that will punish you if you take a very hero heavy army or a monster heavy army. And this is not the only army that does this. So in this case, you had +1 to hit rolls for shooting if he didn't move, which I guess is not going to be that common with Wood Elves, but it could happen in the preceding movement phase. And if it's targeting a hero or monster. So when you're trying to snipe off characters or really whittle down monsters, Now you get the extra pluses. And if you don't have those rends, you better make sure that the attacks that you do shoot hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the key thing that you're going to do. You're going to take the precise shot at the hero, get that rend, and get your bonus to hit, ideally.
All right, Way Watchers.
Well, the Way Watchers, of course, carry over the same kind of thing because that was just their hero. So they have one thing that I thought was unique here, and that is that they have the first unit champion that gets an extra shot rather than an extra combat attack, which is the way that they buff most of those, right? Which is appropriate for guys like this. But they share all the other same stuff with the exception of that solitary hunter ability with the Waywatcher Lord. So they can choose to do the fast shots. They can choose to do the precise shot and get the same results when they roll the 6. They also get the same reward for being a -1 to hit if they're being shot at while they're in cover. So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, it's nice. I could see a unit of these being very hard to deal with because not just because they get the bonus of the cover, but that -1 to hit them. Yeah, that's pretty severe.
I also would like to add that I was a little bit surprised that they even had a 5+ save.
Yeah,
I thought they would just have a 6 at best.
Magical elven cloaks.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're a little more resilient. They're fairly resilient.
Yeah, much more than before. What did they have before?
Well, they had 0 armor in previous incarnation of Warhammer.
Wow.
Okay. But I mean, even 0 armor guys in the Age of Sigmar generally have a 6+.
Right.
Right. They at least have some. But to have another pip of armor was a surprise to see on Way Watchers.
Yeah, and you just sit there, and as long as everybody's touching a piece of terrain, you're going to get that 4-up. So that's pretty big. That's pretty big. So yeah, they're gonna be melding into the bushes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Glade Guard. Okay, so this is you start out with a 6-up. So these are going to be exactly what you're saying. Not exactly the most heavily armored unit. They also have the extra attack for their champion. Pennant banner and the hornblower is pretty similar to what we're seeing. If they're in cover, which I'm sure you're going to have them in cover, that's pretty much par for the course for any missile troops. You're going to have them further back and try to put them in cover to protect them. So let's take a look at their main abilities. This is the Asrai Archery and the Arcane Bodkins. So Asrai Archery, you had 1 to all to hit rolls made for a unit of Glade Guard in the shooting phase. It has 20 or more models, and there are no enemy models within 3 inches. Now, I keep saying this. I'm going to say it just in case people are the first time comers to any of these videos and haven't seen any of the other ones. A lot of people complain about shooting and that shooting is overpowered, and shooting is very powerful, and it should be. But there are definitely things that you can do to counter shooting, and I'm going to probably do a video just talking about anti-shooting, just like I'm going to do about anti-magic and anti-spells, summoning. But if you can get a unit that's within 3 inches, you kind of diffuse a lot of abilities for shooters. And in this one, the ability is doubly counterable because they've got to have more than 20 models. So there's 2 layers here in order for them to get that extra +1 to hit. And a lot of other, I'm kind of surprised in some respects because a lot of other armies will have, like the High Elf army, which we did before, will have the ability to shoot twice, right? So that's a big deal. But yeah, that +1 to hit, I think this is an army, they only have 4-up to hit, so they kind of need this +1. So I'm a little surprised by the Glade Guard. Okay, but here's once per game. This is where I think they kind of make up for it. Once per game, and you better get this thing in early because you'll probably be at your most powerful strength, and you probably won't have anybody within 3 inches of you. You can fire these enchanted arrows, and basically what they do is that they're -3. In the shooting phase, if they well, let's read this. Hold on a second. The arcane bodkins in your shooting phase instead of the normal arrows. If they do the rend of their Asrai log, okay, so I did read this right. Is 3 until the end of that phase. I thought maybe I'd misread this. -3 rend. You don't see that outside of cannons or cannon-like abilities like the Bloodthirster. You just -3 rend. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to erase it for all but the mightiest of heroes.
Oh, God.
There's not a regular troop that has better than a 4, I don't think.
Yeah, and you might have a heavily armored foe and like a 4-up, and they get like bonuses like rerolls. You can't reroll what you can't save.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they make up for a number of different things. Crappy saves, the fact that the mechanic doesn't give you extra attacks like you would for large units, but that -3 definitely puts them over the top in terms of what you want to put on the battlefield.
Yeah, I would say about this. This was. I'm going to pipe in for just for a second and say this was one of my disappointments in the in this army, simply because we've always viewed the Wood Elves as the best archers in the world.
Yeah.
They don't hit on better than a 4+, which is pretty. It's okay, but it's not exceptional. There's lots and lots of troops out there that hit on a 4+. They also wound on a 4+, which again is pretty average. It's pretty straightforward all across the board. They don't have a built-in rend to reflect their precision shots either. So at face value, without looking at any of these abilities, pretty standard, except for their range maybe. I think their range is a bit longer than many. Mm-hmm. So I was disappointed in this one. And I don't think that when we compare their once per game ability of the Arcane Bodkins to, say, the Arrow Storm of the Bretonnian Peasantry, that it really matches up. And they don't get too much of a buff. Like, they don't have a giant scaling buff for having more guys in their unit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The +1 for those two things you have to qualify for really, yeah, yeah, I can see why it's a disappointment. The -3 rend thing just blows me away. But in terms of the general use throughout the game, yes, they're less than impressive. But still, -3 rend.
Yeah, that's nothing to scoff at. You can probably take care of one unit pretty good.
Yeah, heavily armored unit at that.
If you still have a sizable unit with you.
All right, Glade Riders.
Okay. So first thing that pops out to me about these guys is that giant number of 14.
Yeah.
14 inches. Wow. So this is part of the game that I'm intrigued to see with the Wood Elves, is how I keep coming back to this and saying they can be anywhere, right? So they can go where you need them to be. They can be upgraded with banners and hornblowers to get the same sort of stuff that we talked about with other units. They double shoot with their longbows, though, my friend. So they have 2 attacks out of those while on horseback. So that's kind of what I would have liked to see out of the foot Glade Guard, maybe as a balancing act to make me feel better about them. Would have been another way, but that's pretty good, right? Yeah. And when you consider what shooting can do while in combat, and these guys have a spear attack in combat, they're also still a little bit lethal when they're in close quarters, right? Yeah, add to that the ability that they can fire on the run as well. So
yeah, they already have a 14 move. Wow.
Yeah.
And imagine you got that spell for doubling their move and flying. Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah, so they can reach out and touch you from anywhere. And then they can fade away and disappear and still touch you with 20 inches range on their bows. So I quite like these guys. I like them a lot better than the 2-footed Glade Guard. And I think I would favor them over the Glade Guard, even though I'm giving up on that superstar rend that seems exciting.
Yeah, well, it's nice. It definitely is a hook that'll pull you in, but it might not be. Again, it's not throughout the entire combat. It's going to get you at one shot. You better roll well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the Eternal Guard, the first of the ground pounders that don't shoot. All right. So I can't understand why you would have a unit that doesn't have bows when you're in the Wood Elf army, but I guess they want to give you a different flavor and they'll give you an opportunity to play a different type of army. I don't think you get a whole lot here, but let's take a look at it. They start off with a 5 save, so for a unit that can't shoot, they don't have very good armor, but there is an opportunity to improve upon that. They have the Standard Bearer and the Hornblower that we all know. They are using spears at least, so they do get a 2-inch range. Only 1 attack as a base and a 4-up, 4-up, no rend. So let's take a look at their abilities. Do their abilities help make up for some of these real serious deficiencies? Because otherwise they're really lackluster. So in your hero phase, this unit can form a fortress of bows. If it does so, it cannot move. But until until your next hero phase. But until then, you can add 1 to all the hit rolls, wound rolls, and save rolls. Okay, so now we're a 4-up, and you've got a 3-up, 3-up. Okay, so that's not bad, but you can't move. You gotta kind of fortress yourself. Okay, Glade shields. Now you can re-roll saves of 1s. All right, and if you're in cover, you can re-roll saves of 1s and 2s. Not bad. This is a very defensive unit. The way I would use this unit is I would bunker a spellcaster, maybe that Shadow Dancer, or something very important, or maybe even here's another way to use this one: use it as a shield or a box, a box or a line and like a U shape to protect the archers. Maybe those, the pre-archers that we just talked about, so that if there is a unit that may be getting in on them through whatever method, summoning or a fast mover or later in the game, you now have a unit that can fortress up, doesn't need to move, and is going to get a lot of shots because of that 2-inch range, and is going to have a decent saving throw, as well as the ability to re-roll. Now let's take a look at that. They're going to have a 5-up base. They're going to have a +1 to that to their save, so that's a 4. If they're in cover, which I'm sure they're going to be, they're now going to have a 3, and they're going to re-roll 1s and 2s. So you better be rending these guys. That's not so bad. I think these guys are purely defensive and purely situational. You really want to protect a high commodity that's going to get charged or in combat, and you want to make sure that they're all in cover to benefit from these abilities. So not bad, but I wouldn't use them as all around.
Yeah. I kind of envision them as the one that pins the threat, as you say, makes the shield. It engages, and then it tries to hold on while all your fast-moving, flitty stuff gets the real business done.
Yeah, I could see that too. They better have a good retreat if they do get penned in by these guys. You see your point.
Yep.
All right, Wildwood Rangers.
I'm excited about these guys.
Yeah.
Because of the flavor, and because they are your true elite infantry. Okay, so when we look at these guys' stat line, they got a bit of a reach and they got 2 attacks each. There's 3s and 3s with some rending. So this reminds me of Sword Masters and White Lions that we looked at with the High Elves. I think they have a pretty similar stat line. Except they have this juicy ability called the Guardians of the Wildwood. Where when they get messing it in with monsters, their damage goes to die 3 instead of 1.
Yeah.
So that's a juicy reward. I really like that.
And it's a -1 rend, so at least there's a rend there to deal with the armor.
Yep.
What is how do you pronounce it? Drake? Drake. Thank you. A Drake. Yep. Okay, even better. What exactly does that look like? Is that like a halberd or something?
It's just a big. In general, it's a 2-handed blade.
Okay. So what do you think? What do you think? You like these guys better? You like them better than the?
If we're comparing to Eternal Guard, I like them better. I think that they're certainly gonna blood the enemy a lot better. And I don't know that the little bonuses that the Eternal Guard have really makes them as resilient as you need them to be.
And with the commonality of monsters in Age of Sigmar, these guys are well needed on the battlefield to counter it. I think you'd put them as a shield, a screen to protect some of your slower moving shooty units, maybe your casters or your heroes. And if somebody dares to come in range with a monster, they're gonna get their face smashed.
Well, I tell you what I do with them is I go hunting, aggressively hunting. Right. Oh yeah. I get the Shadow Dancer to lead those guys around and put them exactly where they need to be.
Nice. Yes. Yeah, I see that. Okay, well, that's so far we've talked about, and we're kind of getting finished with I think just the Warhawk Riders. So after we do the Warhawk Riders, let's talk about what our thoughts are in terms of our favorite non-shooty unit, which I think we already touched upon. I think it's the Wildwood Rangers, although I could see a use for the Eternal Guard. Let's talk about our favorite of the fast movers and our favorite of the pure archers. So Warhawk Riders first. Yes, 4 wounds apiece.
And we got Sisters of the Thorn to talk about too still.
Oh, I forgot about Sisters of Thorn. Okay, yes. So we'll do those 2, and then let's see what our favorites are. If you had to pick one.
Sure.
Okay, so Warhawk Riders. Can't forget Sisters of the Thorn. Sorry about that, sisters. All right, 4 wounds a pop. They're beefy. They've got the most wounds of any of these units. They're fast moving, 16 inches and 20-inch range for their archers, and they fly. I think that all of this stuff just speaks, yes, I'm going to take a bunch of them. You can take any number of them, so you're going to take a good handful. How many Warhawk Riders were typically taken in a unit in 8th edition? 3, 4?
3 maybe? Yeah, probably 3.
Okay, you're going to take 3. And if you've got a Wood Elf army, you're going to have 3 of these guys. So yeah, you're going to get nice attacks. You're going to get some good shooting abilities, 2 attacks each. I agree with you with what you were saying before. All these platforms, I shouldn't use the word platforms, but these mounted archers seem to get more attacks than the guys who are steady on the ground. Okay, Predator's Descent. You could add 1 to the wound rolls made by Warhawk Riders in combat if they charged. Okay, so they're swooping in. Swift of Wing. When this unit runs, add 6 inches to its move rather than rolling a dice. As if they weren't fast enough. Nice. Swoop through their lines. If after the unit has made all of its attacks in the combat phase, there are no enemy models within 3 inches, it immediately pile in 6 inches and attack again. Okay, so if you finished off your opponent, go after some soft targets, and if you have nobody else, you automatically can then swoop in for another 6 inches to go to the next nearest unit if it's within range, and then get another range of it. These are amazing. I really like them. The only thing I could say that I really have a problem with is the 6-up save. Now, they got 4 wounds, that kind of makes up for it. That 6-up save means when they get hit, they're going to get hurt.
That's why you need your blessings of your Spellweaver to bring their D3 models back.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, that's their saving grace too. Absolutely. All right.
Yeah. Keeping them close might be hard though.
Sisters of the Thorn, and then of course we have Great Eagles. Okay.
All right. Well, let's touch on these girls for a second. So they, again, with their shooting attack, have 2, right? They're short range though with their javelins, so you got to get in there. But they do have a rending ability with those. So those javelins show up, and they might be the kind of thing that helps you out with the armored stuff.
Yeah. At least they got a
standard bearer and hornblower is still the same as the rest of the units. But here's where we get a little bit tricky with them. This is a magic unit, so they are treated very much like a wizard. So they can cast a spell, they can unbind, they know the arcane bolt, and they know the mystic shield. And also a hidden thing in there is that they have a larger unit. If they're 10 or more models, then they're going to add 1 to their casting and unbinding rolls.
Sweet.
Very sweet, I think. Their spell that they have, the Shield of Thorns, does take a 6 to cast, though, so I guess that kind of counteracts that. Most of the other spells we've seen earlier are even easier. They're a 5 to cast. But here's what their Shield of Thorns does. Is it, you can pick any unit, okay? And this, I want to pause there for a second, because it's any unit. So here's your crossover to the Sylvaneth, Mitch.
Yeah.
Not just about Wanderers, but they can pass on the ability to reroll any saves.
Nice.
Until the next hero phase. In addition, and here's a very cool thing, each time that you make a successful save of a 6 or more for that unit, then the attacking unit suffers a mortal wound after they've done their attacks.
Wow. Okay.
How's that for a bit of slap back?
So it's going to be the sisters on the Forest Dragon and the Sisters of the Thorn. Absolutely.
So go get anything with a sister in its name.
Yeah. Well, when these let's see, what are they? How do they look? Do they look cool? Yeah,
Have you seen the models?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, well, they have the same kind of steeds that the Wild Riders do.
Yeah.
But they look like angry witches.
Yeah, I gotta say that I've never played against them. I've never seen them on the table because everybody always took the Wild Riders. But beyond just that magical ability, they have a little bit of ranged as well as some decent hand-to-hand attacking. And I don't remember if the Wild Riders had a 6-up or a 5-up. I think it was a 5-up, right? Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, probably. Well, you could carry shields to have a 4.
Yeah, Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, they're not a super resilient unit, but I think that are not they're not origami when they're in combat.
Yeah.
When you're the enemy, they can do a little bit of output and hold on.
Yeah, but I really like that crossover for the Sylvaneth and the ability to, geez, yeah, I'm gonna have to pick up a box of these.
There you go.
All right, Great Eagles. All right, so Great Eagles, if you know, just like the Warhawk Riders, they have 4 wounds. I think they have the same move, 6 up save. So what's they increase their attacks if they're charging from a 4 to a 6. And then here's the really reason why you take Great Eagles. Soar Away. Very much in tune with what the Wood Elf army should be and what you think they would have is that ability just to not get touched. Not you can't nail them down and they can be where they want to be. At the end of the combat phase, Great Eagles can retreat from close combat and soar away if they're any enemy models within 3 inches of their unit. If they do, roll 3 dice. The total score is how far you can move the Great Eagles when they retreat. The Great Eagles must end this move more than 3 inches away from the enemy unit. If they can't move far enough, they do not retreat. But here's the point. You can stick these guys into combat. You can do some bloody damage, and then you can get them away. And that's important. You don't have a lot of mechanics where at the end of the combat phase, you can remove them from there and then move them where you want to move them.
I have to admit, I wanted to see a little bit more of this in the Wood Elf army, and that's not a criticism of it. It's just a wish list, really. I want to see more of that ability, though.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised we didn't see almost every unit have the ability to like run and shoot, or or not, maybe not run and charge, but run and shoot. We saw it a couple of times, but not throughout. It's not throughout the entire army. They didn't overdo it, but they could have added it to a couple units. I agree.
Yeah, they got there in different ways, like the Shadow Dancer and extra moves and being able to fly. So they got it in other ways, but not exactly this way.
But they're fast in ways that you're not going to see as much in, say, a High Elf army or a Dark Elf army. Okay, so before we get into the Sylvaneth, tell me of the archer types, of the Cav types. Which are your favorite up until this point from what we've gone over?
Okay, well, I think I'll maybe just quickly sum it up in all things, and that is that I think the GLADE Riders are my favorite of the archer types because they double tap and they have some semblance of combat ability, although I'm not going to rely on them. They're still soft, but their mobility and the ability to shoot while running means that they can be anywhere they need to be, and they could just lock in on whatever target is needed at the time. My favorite of the infantry is the Wildwood Rangers, for exactly the reasons that you said. Is I can almost guarantee that there's going to be some monsters to hunt, and if I pair them up with that Shadow Dancer, who I'm also in love with, then they can be exactly where they need to be to kill the thing that needs to be killed. Yeah,
and this is one again. I made the point. I'm going to accentuate it now. The game has mechanics. They may not be readily available with some of the people who just read the 4-page core rules. You gotta read the PDFs. You gotta read the Warscrolls for the armies. It's a lot to read, but that makes up the 400 pages of rules that you thought that this game didn't have. When you look at the game as a whole, after we go through all of these unlockings, we see that there are some armies that really put into check some of these abuses that people can do, like what I've been doing with my son's ogre army, which is just a wall of meat, a lot of monsters. You go and you counter that with a fast-moving army of Wood Elves that can just beat the daylights out of monsters. And what you're going to have is you're going to have a lot of thundering monsters just little by little getting whittled down and then eventually falling. And just like Wood Elf armies that we've seen in the past, not taking much damage and not being able to nail them down and do any damage to them. I challenge somebody with a major monster army to oppose a Wood Elf army built to just ruin it. I think that it's really, really easy to do so with the Wanderer version of Wood Elves.
Yep.
All right.
So for you, anything beyond what stands out for you beyond the sisters
I think the big thing that stands out the most for me is still the Forest Dragon and that 3-inch ability.
Yeah.
Just considering that you're measuring from the model, it's just, I said it before, I'll say it again. There's a huge footprint for a big dragon, and that's gonna you could fly up and just end sideways. You make sure you don't move any part of the model further than your move characteristic, which means you can basically reposition them any way you want as long as no part of the model move further than that point, because there's no facing in the game anymore. But you can stretch that dragon out sideways, especially if it came in from that direction, and you can cover the range for a lot of models. Now, whether you're sideways or forward on, also remember that 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 head is probably going to overlap or sit over the top of your frontline units and even go extend further into your opponent's ranks. And that's just how it works. Apparently, there's nothing that says you can't or shouldn't be able to do that. So you do, and why not? There's just so much you can do with that. That ability is amazing to me.
Yeah, that's the clear winner. And who doesn't love dragons? Dragons.
I have a dragon. I forget where it's from. I got it in a trade, and I'm gonna try and paint it up where the plates of it are bonish, but the skin is gonna be kind of like a greenish hue. And I'm going to try to double it as not just a zombie dragon, but as a forest dragon. I'll have to find a way to get the paint job just right, but I'm sure there's some way I can do the washes for the green that I could still probably get away with it being a forest dragon, and still I can make it be a zombie dragon when I want it to be. And I'll just magnetize the riders. But it's a really good dragon. It's not quite as big as, it's just maybe a tad smaller in its wing spread to the GW ones. But hey, I'll probably have to put it on the PMP when I finally get to it, sometime in 2025.
Do it sooner.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. All right, let's talk about Sylvaneth. All right, so yes. Sylvaneth. I'm loving that there's at least a couple of units that I just have to include in my Sylvaneth army. If you are a fan of treemen, of the idea of of Treebeard and the Ents in Lord of the Rings, like my son is, he loves Treebeard, he loves the Ents, he loves that scene from Two Towers. He was absolutely amazed that I actually picked this up after he started talking about it, and he just got a glimpse of the box. But when I read this army, there are certain things about it that just stood out. And one of them was just the ability to maneuver and do really what a deep strike or an alpha attack with this army because of some of the mechanics that you have. So let's go take a look at it. First and foremost, we've got the Branch Wraith. Okay, now this is the wizard, or one of the wizards rather, but this is a hero wizard in the army. I'm not sure what it was capable of doing in 8th edition, but as a matter of fact, let me start off with that. What was a Branch Wraith capable of in 8th edition? Do you know?
The translation was it was a level 1 life wizard that still had some attacky combat abilities.
Okay.
So she wasn't a frail old man, weaving fingers from a distance. She gets stuck in there and used to buff your guys. So they had a bit of prowess on the other end.
I think it's clear that their stock went up a little bit for Branch Wraiths. I got 2 of them. I didn't realize one came in the Warhost box. I was thrilled, but I bought an extra one. I have no problem that I have 2 of these now. 3 attacks, 2-inch range, decent 4-up, 4-up, -1 rend. Can't say anything about that. By the way, if this video cuts out, all of a sudden it's because I lost electricity because a storm is coming. I can hear the thunder in the background. So just in case that happens, probably won't, but just in case it does, just want to let everybody know. In any case, it's a wizard, so it's probably a wizard that you're probably going to be, potentially moving up into combat if you want. But you could sit him back and do what this wizard is all about. First of all, it's got the Blessing of the Forest, but then the next thing is the Rouse to Wrath. Blessing of the Forest. You subtract 1 for all hit rolls made against this unit if it's within 3 inches of a Sylvaneth Wildwood. Yeah, we'll talk about Sylvaneth Wildwoods in a minute. Just expect that if you're playing the Branch Wraiths. The Sylvaneth, you're going to have at least 4 of these bases for woods, the Sylvaneth Wildwood. Go look at the War Scroll. Maybe we'll go pull it up before we finish off and just take a look at some of the benefits you get. Maybe that probably is a good idea because it's so important to the Sylvaneth army.
I think we should.
Yeah, we'll do that before we finish up. So now you're subtracting 1 to all the hit rolls made against it, and you're going to see this with dryads as well. So we'll get to that. Rouse to Wrath. So this is a casting cost of 7, so it's not cheap. Okay, it's a little bit above average, but there are ways to get around that. If you're next to an arcane, piece of terrain, you'll get a +1. So just try to keep in mind where that random terrain is, and where you are compared to it. But if you cast this successfully, you get basically a unit of dryads. All right, it can't be more than 3 inches from the enemy. But think about that. You have it has to be within 12 inches of the caster, not a problem. Fully within 12 inches of it. Has, wait, let me restate this. It has to be fully within a Sylvaneth wildwood and within 12 inches of a caster, but it has to be more than 3 inches from an enemy. So you could set this thing up 4 inches away from an enemy, and essentially that is the casting. It still can charge because the casting is done in the command phase. These guys can still charge, and it does not say it takes their move. Okay, so even if you're behind enemy lines and you're nowhere near the enemy, those summon dryads can move, where most of the time when you summon things, that's their move. They can charge, but they can't move. These guys can also move. This is why you get more dryads if you take a branch wraith.
Yep, I like it.
All right, so dryads.
Well, let's talk about them, because they are definitely paired up with the branch wraith in all ways, shapes, and forms. So this is your stock infantry, I guess, if you're looking at an exclusively Sylvaneth group. Mm-hmm. So they are fighty, being that they have 2 attacks. Average as far as the other things, but let's make a notable point of their movement of 7 inches.
Yeah.
So they're a quick group of trees. They don't have any command stuff available to them, so no banners, no musicians. But here's what they do have: is they're full of debuffs. So they have that same Blessing of the Forest that the branch wraith had, that you're -1 from all the hit rolls, shooting and combat, if these guys are near the woods. Also, here's a very cool thing: this enrapturing song. In your own combat phase, you can enrapture an enemy unit within 3 inches and add 1 to the hit rolls for the attacks made by this unit against that enraptured unit.
Nice.
That's juicy, I think.
Not a spell.
No, not a spell. It's just I make that choice, and here you go. Take it in the face. They have another great ability, I think. When they gather in great numbers, they make many twisting limbs and branches, etc., etc. And effectively, this just means you add 1 to the result of save rolls for this unit when they are at least 12 models strong.
Right. So there'll be
There's a good reward, isn't there?
A 4-up, and if you're in a wood or near, or if you can gain the cover from woods, you'll be a 3-up. That's not bad at all.
And -1 to hit.
And -1 to hit. Sweet.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the opportunity to talk. Okay. So you were about to say something.
No, I was just going to say that with all those things packaged together, it really rewards you for being near the woods, as it should. And it really makes you a pretty tough, resilient unit. Even though when you look at the initial stat line over there in that little shield dais, it doesn't look super great. Yeah. But these innate abilities, they are pretty buffy.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Sylvaneth wood. First of all, the Sylvaneth wood is you get 2 or more of these in each time you take a Sylvaneth wood. Just take 2. All right, don't abuse this. But every Sylvaneth wood consists of 2 bases. Okay, that's Citadel bases are fairly big for the woodland. So you take 2 of those and you put them basically right together, or maybe a little gap between them. That's a placement of 1 Sylvaneth wood. And we're going to talk about the battalion formation later on where you can get more for the Guardians of the Deep Wood. So here's the rules for the Sylvaneth wood.
I just want to interject before you do that, Mitch.
Yeah.
For the sake of those visualizing at home, I have the woods, and they are about 8 inches by 5 inches in dimension.
Okay, well that helps. You have one right in front of you? I'm sure people have seen the Citadel woods if they've been playing Warhammer. But if they haven't, if you're new to Age of Sigmar, you don't come from Warhammer, go check them out, or make your own. Make your own bases if you don't buy the actual official one. 8x5 is a pretty good section, and that's 2 of those bases for each Sylvaneth wood. All right, or if you're going to abuse this rule more, but don't do that. All right. Wildwood. You roll a die for each model that makes a run or charge move across or finishing on a Sylvaneth wood. On a roll of 1, the model is slain. Let me emphasize this. On a roll of 1, the model is slain. This is kind of like with certain units previously that did charges through difficult terrain, like Cav. If they rolled a 1, you remove the model, or they took a wound or whatever. In this case, the model is slain. So if it's a dragon and you roll a 1 charging through or landing on a Sylvaneth Wildwood, you roll a 1, it dies. Okay, just try to a bloodthirster runs through or lands on a Sylvaneth Wildwood, rolls a 1, it's dead. That's pretty crazy. Okay, do not roll for models that have the Sylvaneth. Okay, I have to take this back. Monster or hero. So monsters and heroes don't have to do this. These are rank and file troops. Okay, I should have known that. So yes, your bloodthirsty dragon, it's not going to die. So I'll edit that out later. Okay, but any rank and file troops, any fast moving, cav, any flyers that might have landed in there, you're really risking multi-wound models heavily in this case. So if you're entrenched in these woods with these dryads or any of these other anything else in the Sylvaneth army, you really have this great defensive mode, and you're probably going to almost guarantee taking them because of some of the special abilities that go with the Sylvaneth army. Roused by magic. Roll a dice whenever a spell is successfully cast within 6 inches of a Sylvaneth woodland, even if it is unbound. On a roll of 5 or more, the forest is roused by the magical energy and attacks. If this happens, all units within 1 inch of the Sylvaneth Wildwood suffer die 3 mortal wounds. Okay? Sylvaneth units are not attacked if a Wildwood is roused in this way. So you could tactically position a Sylvaneth Wildwood in your enemy's deployment or near where they probably would more than likely, and you'll see this when we get to the battalion. More than likely, after they're deployed, you'll have this opportunity if you take this formation. And then if they cast spells, bound or unbound, successful or unsuccessfully cast, on a 5 or a 6 or 5 or more, because you might have bonuses in this regard, units within 1 inch of that Wildwood are going to take mortal wounds. Use this strategically to your advantage. It's pretty powerful. And then there's going to be other abilities that will enhance that, like having cover and things like with the dryads. Pretty nice. If you're going to do this army, you need to have some forests. You may not need it necessarily for the Wanderer Wood Elves, but for the Sylvaneth, you need it. Okay.
Yeah, and that pairs up nicely. So it gives you. So to be clear, what you're talking about here is that this is part of the battalion scroll. Am I getting that terminology right?
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end, and you'll see what I mean by that, because it gives. I'll foreshadow it right now. It basically allows you to take 2 Sylvaneth Wildwood as part of the formation. So that's 4 bases.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you do is you take 2 of them, you position them, you position them wherever you want on the battlefield after terrain is placed. I don't know. I forget. I'll have to read it when we get to it. I think it's before deployment, but let's get to that when we get to that. But yeah, you can use this as an advantage in your game. You use this as it's a deployment. It's like a war scroll that you've deployed. It's actually it's a piece of terrain that's like part of your army.
Yeah. It harkens back to the Wood Elf ability, where you could bring a spare woods to the field just for playing the Wood Elf army.
Yeah, and there was also a 100-point item where you could take die. Was it die 3 or die 6? What was it? Something like
die
that.
3.
Die 3.
Die 3.
Yeah, still. Yeah, let's make the board woods, the whole board. Okay, Treekin, all yours.
Well, our friends the Treekin. So this is your equivalent of monstrous cavalry. You can see they're beefy with 4 wounds, and they're finally something with a respectable save.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And pretty good beaters as well. You can see that they wound on a 3, and it is also a rarity to have something that does more than 1 point of damage. Right. So you get 2 points of damage out of there. Okay. So that's very good. Also, if you feel bad about being only hitting on a 4, well, as long as you have a Sylvaneth hero anywhere, well, the range is 18 inches, but let's be honest, you're going to have one somewhere within there. So you're going to actually hit on 3 instead. So that's pretty sweet. Although they themselves, they have this little tip on magic here. They themselves are not wizards, but when they're present on the field, then it grants any of your Sylvaneth wizards the ability to cast this regrowth spell. And it's simple to cast. It's a 5, and it's that healing spell. So you can cast it onto a Treekin model and have that Treekin heal up die 3 wounds.
Yeah, I want to point out something about this where it says the Sylvaneth. This is one of the few times or only times I've seen where it specifically says as long as they're on the battlefield. And, you know, I don't know if this is what supports or refutes the concept of the Warscrolls unlocking summoning abilities, but I think it more supports it than anything else, because the differentiation here is not that it unlocks it, it's that if the unit is gone, if you take this unit away, if it dies, it removes this spell, the ability to regrowth from wizards. It's not just that it unlocks it, which is how I view, you know, summoning. It's unlocked unless the wizard itself has the summoning spell on the War Scroll. The War Scroll for the unit grants it to wizards. So if you don't deploy it, you don't get that War Scroll. You don't get that summoning spell. This case, it basically says that when you deploy this, it gives this spell to Sylvaneth wizards. But if the unit dies, it no longer has access to it. That's how I'm reading it.
Well, that's because it's a specific spell that takes a nod at healing specifically Treekin.
Yeah.
And nothing else.
Still, you know, it's the specific.
I know that's a whole. Yeah, I know that's a whole world of debate.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then I will mention this as well. If you don't like the way that works, change it. Play how you want. Nothing. Yeah. That's in the rules too on the 4th page. Play how you want. Okay, we're not going to talk about Durthu, although I'd love to, but we're already getting pretty long in time here. Let's go to the Treeman. Okay, the Treeman. Okay, I think this one is the shooty Treeman. I think. Let's see. Yeah, he is. Okay, so he's got a 12-inch range, 5 attacks, really good save, 3 up, starting with a 3 up. So you're sitting in a wood. You're going to be 2 up. If you cast a Mystic Shield, you got a 1-up save. The Treemen are awesome. They're amazing. They don't just look good on the battlefield. They're amazing. 12 wounds. So you got a 12-inch range with 5 attacks. You're going to start out with, 2 to hit before it starts getting wounded. 3s to wound. You got a rend in there. That's not so bad at all. And while you may not think that the 12-inch range is that big, you'll see why later on when we get to the formation, why that's not such a bad deal. Sweeping blows, starts off with 4 attacks here. It's got the massive impaling talon, which does many wounds. It can stand in there and fight, and it can shoot. It's good in both, not great in either. But then here we got some of its special abilities. First, the impale. All right. If a Treeman's massive impaling talons inflict a wound on an enemy model, roll a dice and subtract 1 from the roll. If the roll equals or exceeds the number of wounds the enemy model has remaining, not on its profile, remaining, it's slain. So you weaken a model and it's down to its last few wounds, you can just outright destroy it. And that's pretty damn good. All right. All you got to do is do a wound where it gets to like the 2 or 3, and you can finish it off right there. That's pretty friggin' good. Ground shaking stomp. At the start of the close combat phase, the Treeman stomps the ground. Roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of the model. On a roll of 4 or more, that unit is knocked off their feet by the impact and subtracts 1 from all hit rolls in the combat phase as they regain their footing. That's at the start of the combat phase. I love it. Now, Spirit Paths. This is where that Alpha Strike thing comes in. If a Treeman is within 3 inches of a Sylvaneth Wildwood at the start of your movement phase, why wouldn't you do that, by the way? You're going to do that. Here's why. It can travel along the Spirit Paths. If it does so, remove the Treeman from the battlefield and then set it up within 3 inches of a different Sylvaneth Wildwood, more than 9 inches away from the enemy models. This is its movement for the phase, for the movement phase. Doesn't mean you can't charge. Doesn't mean you can't, you can't shoot. You basically set up your Sylvaneth Woods in different places along the battle with the intention that you're going to alpha strike. You're going to move your treemen through the spirit paths onto that. If your opponent doesn't try to situate some units near enough to that wildwood to try and neuter this, they're fools. But if they do, they're taking the risk of taking mortal wounds if they get too close. So there's certainly a disadvantage with that. There's a counter to it, but then you're taking risks if you're too close to these wildwoods with some of the other mechanics, like rousing the wildwood if any casting gets done. Treemen are pretty butch as monsters go.
Oh yeah, I would say so. Comparing them to other monsters that we've seen, am I as excited about them as I am about dragons?
No.
Maybe not.
No, 6-inch move without flying, not quite, but still.
But I think if you get into combat with a dragon, you can probably, with some of these abilities, especially that always surprising impale attack, I think you can worry that winged beastie.
Yeah, I can't wait to try this one out, the impale. All right, you get the treatment ancient.
We need to have some kaiju. We need to have some kaiju battles of giant monsters.
Oh yeah, I love it. I just had one recently. If you haven't seen my video of the ogres, my ogre battle with my son's Beastclaw Avalanche. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it.
I've not.
So okay, we're going to digress real quickly here. Beastclaw Avalanche, Thunder Tusk, Stonehorn, 2 units of Mournfang, so 2 Mournfang each, and then a couple of giants destroyed in one turn. Took some wounds back. I don't think they took any casualties, but took some damage. Absolutely destroyed 2 Mortis Engines and 2 zombie dragons. And 2 zombie dragons and 2 Mortis Engines. One turn.
Ooh.
Walked right through them.
That's fun times.
Yeah. It was pretty bad. Okay. Treatment Ancient. Your go.
Okay. Well, there's not too much different to really describe here. It does all the stuff that your stock tree man does, including that lovely impale attack and its ground shaking stomp. It can jump around the battlefield through the spirit paths as well. But what we tack onto this is that he's also a wizard. So you can cast a spell, you can unbind, got the typical stuff. And the unique spell to this guy is the Awakening of the Wood. Takes a 6 to cast it. You can reach out as far as 24 inches, and your targeting is one of those Sylvaneth wildwoods. Now, any enemy within 3 inches of the wildwood is going to suffer die 3 mortal wounds from the trees whacking them and punishing them for invading their serene natural territory. So it's I think it's good because it could potentially hammer on multiple units.
Yeah.
Right. Thus causing multiple battle shock tests.
Yeah, you strategically place your woods the appropriate way, where near your opponent, and they don't give it pause if they ignore it. Yeah, they're going to get the big surprise.
Yeah. So I dig
it. And here are the rules for the Sylvaneth Wildwood. Since it's just we'll finish up. Let's just talk about Durthu real quickly.
Sure.
All right. So if you have a minute before, so we can do that, or no, or you have to go.
Oh no, we may as well see it through. This is the last guy on the list. Yeah.
The only reason why I wanted to say Durthu is the only special character for the Sylvaneth. And he has, I'm just going to, before we get into all the other abilities, he's got his Impale, he's got his Ground Shaking Stomp, he's got his Spirit Paths, he's got a nice Eldar Wrath Sword, not Wraith, Wrath Sword. I almost said Eldar Wraith. Die 3 attacks, an extra die 3 attacks if he's within 3 inches of a Sylvaneth wood, which is he's a tough guy. He's a super tree man. But here's this ability, this command ability, Tree Singing. If Durthu uses this ability, you can summon a Sylvaneth Wildwood to the battlefield. Okay, you set up a summon Wildwood 2 bases anywhere on the battlefield within 30 inches of this model and more than 6 inches from any other model, not just enemy. This is every turn. This is a command ability. So
yeah,
bring another 5 or 6 of these these Wildwoods. You're going to need to have 10 of them. And each of these wildwoods are two apiece, two bases apiece. Yeah, he's just going to plop down wildwoods so that the rest of your army gets all kinds of bonuses. That's what I wanted to mention about Durthu.
Yeah, I think that guy's a linchpin, and if you're going to do a pure Sylvaneth force and involve nothing of the Wanderer Elves that we spoke of in the first part of this, I think he's a must-have, because he's going to trigger more of these woods to show up, which means that your branch wraiths can raise more dryads in them, which means that your treemen ancients can hammer the units that are tucked around them, and it'll all just snowball from there. But it has to start with Durthu making sure that the field is populated.
Yeah, and that War Host box, it's got 2 units of dryads, 16 apiece, so you get 32. You want to have more than the 12. You want to have like the 16 for you have a couple extra bodies, because you get a bonus if you're more than 12 or more in a unit for the dryads. Comes with a branch wraith. Comes with 3 treemen, so you can make treemen ancients, or a Durthu. You need 3, all right, to make the battalion that we're going to talk about. So if you want to include Durthu and use the battalion formation, you want to have a 4th treeman. That's a lot of wounds. That is a lot of wounds. So
a lot of monsters.
What?
It's a lot of exciting stomping monsters.
Oh my God, yeah. So let me first of all, you don't even need Durthu, but let's just take a look at and we'll give you the Wandering Host, but I'm really excited about this Guardians of the Deepwood. I can't wait to paint these guys up and put some flock or clump foliage on all the bases, or even on some of the models even. Just really make them look appropriately woodland. Okay, so you need 3 treemen or treemen ancients, 2 units dryads, and then you get 2 units of Sylvaneth wildwood. So what do you get from that? What's the bonuses you get? We've talked about all the synergies with the wildwoods. Let's talk about what the formation gives you. In any of your movement phases, you basically can take your entire battalion, so all the ancients, the ancient treemen, all the dryads, and you can have them deployed to the side. You don't have to set them up on the battlefield. And then in any of your movement phases, you can transport any or all of the units onto the battlefield. They have to be within 3 inches of the Sylvaneth wildwood and more than 9 inches from an enemy model. That's their move. They can still charge. So, talk about deep striking. You position your woodland, your Sylvaneth wildwoods after all the terrain has been deployed, and now you can basically position this entire battalion off to the side. Sacred Groves. This battalion's woodlands are set up on the battlefield. Again, after all scenery pieces are set up, but before the battle begins. So, and either side sets up their army. So it's before deployment of the armies, but after the scenery. All right, and they can be placed anywhere. So you want to position some of the woods somewhere in the middle of the battlefield, extending into your opponents, so you can get that deep strike capability or the spell capability to move your treemen in, but also such that you'll have some benefits as you guys close in. But then you should also consider where you want to have one that's going to start somewhere in your deployment, so you have some basic beginning synergy with some of these abilities from turn 1. So it's nice that you get 2 of these with 2 bases each. And then, of course, if you do bring in Durthu, you can start summoning more of them. I love the army. It's very fluffy. It's very synergistic. It doesn't have a lot of really extreme range, but I think the ability for you to close pretty quickly, some good magic, and obviously the ability to transport across the battlefield to get into range with some of that shooting attacks is going to prove to be it's going to make up for some of the deficiencies. It's not a very long range army.
Yep, I can see why you want to do them. It's you can recreate the thunderous charge of the trees out of Fangorn Forest, led by Treeman, Quick Beam, and all his pals.
Yeah, we'll certainly be doing that. We'll be playing the music from Lord of the Rings when we do it. Okay, so here's the Wanderer Host. Tell us about the Wanderer Host.
Well, you can see there that it effectively selects an army from, I guess, all the different aspects of what they have to offer. You'll have a Glade Lord, you'll have the Spell Singer, 2 Archer Glade Guard units, a Glade Rider unit, an Eternal Guard unit, and then your choice of either War Dancers, Way Watchers, or Wildwood Rangers.
That's a big army.
Yeah, it's a lot of units to work with. Now, what it offers you is two things. One, it offers you to not deploy. So you can just say, go ahead, put all your stuff down. I'll watch what you do, and then I'll deploy. And you can go on any of the 4 table edges within 6 inches of them, but more than 9 inches away from the enemy. So what they're trying to represent here is your sneakiness and your ambush ability of a Wood Elf army. So there's probably scenarios where you gain a big advantage to that. If it's just a straight up pitch battle, I don't know that I'm really, my hair is blown back by that really. But the second ability, called the Sure-Footed Stalkers, I'll quickly sum it up. Is it's a 4+ ward save for every model.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry. No, I'm misreading it. I missed a very important key. It's not against every wound. It's just against wounds suffered from a scenery rule. You brush off the wound on a 4.
So other than the Wildwood, what would that be?
Well, there's Sinister Terrain, right?
Yep.
Is that the one? I think that's the one that if you're nearby and
or is it deadly?
You roll a 1, it deals damage to you.
Is it Sinister or Deadly?
One of those.
Okay, so 1 will do that if you're nearby.
One of those. So there's one scenery type that could do that. There's probably things like the Ophidian Realm Gates and other scenery bits that have that built into them as well.
Right, because you're randomly rolling each turn what effect those gates have.
Yeah. I don't know that I know that the Dragon Gate or the Ophidian Realm Gate, one of those two, has the chance to wound you if you stand too close. So I would say, does it really build a synergistic army for you? Not really. Is the forced choices of some of these units worth the ability to ambush all around? Maybe. But I think that's scenario sensitive.
Yeah.
So I think my summary of that is it doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit of a miss in my opinion. I think that I've seen this a couple of times where you have a really good kind of small or mid-sized army that gives you some benefits, and then they have this massive thing, which is like it's almost like a 2,500 or 3,000 point army in 8th edition, and you get some benefits, but maybe those benefits aren't really worth it. Not all of these battalion formations are really, are the ones that you'd go after. I don't know if I'd go after this one.
Yeah.
I think there's enough synergy in the Wood Elf army that you don't need to. You take what you want. You stick within depending on which Glade Lord you take, and which units you want to work with them, how many of those. And there's plenty of units that work really well together without the formation. It's unfortunate, but there's plenty of synergy already. So I'm fine with this being just one of those. Hey, if you're really going to play a fairly big game, you might already have this on the battlefield and take advantage of it.
Well, this thought will kind of segue into my final thoughts about it, about the whole Wood Elf Wanderer part of what we looked at.
Let's go to summations. Go ahead.
Sure. And so what I'd say is that I don't think you really need this ambush ability that the Wanderer host offers, because you can be so very mobile, and as we talked about throughout, being able to feint in one direction and redeploy to another place pretty easily with the selection of Wood Elf units as it is. And that's my takeaway from the overall view of the Wanderer section of the Wood Elf army, is that it's still pretty mobile.
Yeah, very. I think it could definitely match the Slaanesh Demons of Chaos army in terms of how fast it can move, and in a lot of cases, especially with that spell, exceed. It's just amazing how fast it can be. Although I do think that I would like to have seen, like you said, if I had any criticism, it's more of the run and shoot type stuff. There's some of there, but I think they could have probably put that on maybe 1 or 2 more units, and just to make it a little bit more appropriate for the army. But still, your thoughts on the Wood Elf army as a whole, how it compares, and if it stays true to itself.
I think it translates in a lot of ways. I don't want to go over my gripe about the basic Glade Guard again, and how I don't feel that they're the best shooters in the world anymore. Yeah. But if I was, maybe I'll sum it up this way: if I was to take this away and I was to construct a force maybe I'll frame it to you that way. If I was to construct a force of Wanderer Wood Elves, I would be taking that battle standard for sure, so I can have that radius ward save that it offers up. I would probably get me the Glade Lord riding a stag with a unit of Glade Riders, so I can get that business done. And I probably would, for the first time in my life, get some hounds, because I really dig that ability and possibility of springing them on somebody and charging from like 2 meters away and just like getting right into your face. Of course, I'm going to have a dragon, because dragons. Talked about that enough. And I am going to kind of get a little bit into magic with both the Spellweaver and the Shadow Dancer. But the Shadow Dancer is really, truly the one that I love the most. So I might even do 2 of him.
Nice.
And get him in the mix. But leave War Dancers behind. I don't know that I need them.
Yeah, after reading through them, I think that was the case in 8th edition too. Nobody took War Dancers. It's kind of too bad. Some units have gotten better in Age of Sigmar than the last iteration of Warhammer. That's one of the cases where I don't think they've improved much at all.
And as a final thought, I need to go out and buy Wildwood Rangers.
You don't have them? I'm shocked.
I don't know. No,
right.
I don't.
Well, I'm going to be getting some Sisters of the Thorn. I'm going to be getting that. I'm going to be converting up a Sisters on a Forest Dragon, and I've got a bunch of Wildwood forests that I'm going to have to build beyond the ones I'm already working on. So there's going to be some MDF cutting with some doorknob. What is it? The drill bit piece that puts holes in MDF board and wooden board. I'm going to be drilling a lot of those. So yeah. I'll be bringing 5 or 6 of these with me if I'm bringing Durthu with me. That is, but yeah, I'm impressed with the Sylvaneth. Definitely an army that you're gonna want to know its limitations. Its limitations are it's gonna have to get up with spell mechanics and with the Citadel wood mechanic, the actual terrain pieces, those mechanics. You're gonna need that stuff. Because that's how they're going to get up closer. If you just stand off, an army that's shooty or heavy magic is going to eventually whittle you down. So you need that stuff in order to use the benefit of what that army is about, and that's traveling through those woodlands and staying close to the terrain and getting all those lovely benefits. I really appreciate you doing this with me again, Kieran. I'm sure we're going to go and have another one at some point. We'll talk about maybe all of the Elven special characters. We'll get them all in one particular session. And hey, thanks again for coming on board and doing another unlocking. And for everybody who's out there who's tuned in, there's a lot more coming. Probably won't be doing one until sometime next week. But I have some games coming up this weekend that I'll be doing battle reports for. Thank you again for tuning in, and have a great day.
Farewell.